Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Pollution is one of the biggest global killers, affecting over 100 million people. Each year, 1.2 trillion gallons of untreated sewage, storm water, and industrial waste are dumped into the U.S. waterways, and approximately 40% of the lakes in America are too polluted for fishing, aquatic life, or swimming. With shocking facts like these and the states running out of money, shouldn't policies be developed and enforced to pay for pollution cleanup? I strongly believe they should be. Today I'm going to tell you why the government should enforce such policies and pay for pollution cleanup. I'm going to talk about what pollution cleanup is, why we need to care about it, the development importance of the P2 law, the EPA's shift from pollution control to pollution prevention, and the benefits that these environmental laws have had and why these policies need to continue to be enforced. One of the biggest issues with pollution is the cleanup process. So to begin, let's talk about what exactly pollution cleanup is. The cleanup of environmental pollution involves a variety of techniques ranging from simple biological processes to advanced engineering technologies. Many industry-specific programs are funded by taxes on that industry. For example, the state of Florida has a dry cleaner program. The Florida legislature has established a state-funded program with to clean up properties that are contaminated as a result of the operations of a dry cleaning facility. The program is administered by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and is sponsored by the dry cleaning industry to address the environmental, economic, and liability issues resulting from their contamination. Above all, the state-funded policy is simply taking control of and owning the pollution you caused and making the changes necessary to fix it. So why should we care about the policies and enforcement of this cleanup? It sounds like it's a bigger issue that one person can't do much about. Well, that's not so. Every business generates waste. For some, it may only be waste paper or dirty water. For others, it's hazardous or toxic chemicals that require special handling and disposal. Whether the type or volume of waste a company generates, it's all the same in one respect. It's costing them money. In the EPA's article, A Small Business Guide to Preventing Waste, they stated they're paying for it twice, once when they buy it and the second time when they throw it away. The bottom line is that preventing waste will save you money. In addition to cost savings, it can also help businesses improve worker safety, reduce liability, and enhance their image in the community. In 1990, Congress passed the Pollution Prevention Act. There are significant opportunities for industries to reduce or prevent pollution at the source through cost-effective changes in production, operation, and the use of raw materials. Source reduction is different and more desirable than waste management and pollution control, according to the EPA. Since the United States of America annually produces millions of tons of pollution and spends tens of billions of dollars per year controlling it, Congress went ahead and passed this P2 Act. The enactment and enforcement of this law has had a great effect on the pollution prevention around the country and is the best example to date of the positive effects of the government funding for pollution cleanup. The Pollution Prevention Act of 1990 established a bold national objective for environmental protection. The EPA Science Advisory Board has also strongly recommended that pollution prevention be emphasized as the preferred means for reducing risk, explaining that pollution prevention at the source, through the redesign of production processes, energy, and water conservation, is usually a far cheaper and more effective way to reduce the risk, especially over the long term. So while it's not the only method of pollution prevention, it is, however, the preferred one. It is estimated that U.S. firms paid more than $200 billion per year to comply with federal environmental laws. That's big bucks, and is it money well spent? I strongly believe it is. Taken as a whole, the benefits of the U.S. environment regulation have outweighed the costs. Take, for example, the Clean Air and Water Act. A study by the U.S. EPA looked at the cost and benefits of this act from 1970 to 1990. It found that the total costs through this period were $500 billion, a huge amount. However, it also found that the estimate of health and other benefits from the cleaner air was $22 trillion, about 44 times higher than its costs. These benefits would not be possible without the development and enforcement of such policies for the government to fund the cleanup. The government has worked hard to enact and fund cleanup through the Clean Air and Water Act, the Pollution Prevention Law, and many more. The benefits of such policies have far exceeded expectations. If we want to reduce these statistics, the best option is to continue to develop and enforce government policies for pollution cleanup.
Ladies and gentlemen, the reality is that zero defects in product plus zero pollution plus zero risk on the job is equivalent to maximum growth of government plus zero economic growth plus runaway inflation. Dixie Lee Ray. Policies should absolutely not be developed and enforced by state, federal, or both to pay for pollution cleanup. There are 5 main reasons why the government should not employ this method of cleanup. However, the main reason being the fact that the human race as a whole, but specifically the environmentalist movement, cannot determine what constitutes the clean enough. To some, clean enough means to clean Earth enough to survive for an extended amount of time. On the other side is that as long as we limit and reduce emissions more than previously, it would be good enough. The final side of the how to define clean group is to eliminate human-produced pollution and emissions to zero. The fact that we cannot specifically determine what clean is defined as from a regulation and enforcement standpoint shows just how unrealistic it is for the government to try and govern this pollution cleanup. Another reason why the government should not further regulate and enforce pollution cleanup is that these experts are only experts in ecological processes. Are they including the economic impact of pollution prevention? Do the statistics they present only include cases where the waste prevention has only helped the company? Certainly they don't believe that preventing every type of waste can be economically beneficial. That would be ludicrous. While it's at its core, some pollution prevention does eliminate the waste and make it economically more beneficial for the company or corporation. There are certain types of waste that are economically needed. A quote by Frederick Anderson states, "Pollution prevention in practice tends to set as an ultimate objective zero use of or zero discharge from an enormous ill-defined collection of substances and processes without regard to economic efficiency and the high economic value of some types of pollution. Entire categories of substances and processes may be in effect declared off limits to commerce or are designated for totally enclosed systems without regard to whether optimal discharge levels should be permitted instead of what alternatives are therefore required," leading to another reason why government involvement in pollution cleanup and enforcement should not happen. The P2 law, which does specifically what it has stated in the second point of the argument, it overgeneralizes waste, it sets unreachable numbers for some companies, it relegates and enforces at the EPA's discretion. Seemingly the EPA can and will fundamentally run a corporation through fees and taxes placed on said corporation that they don't fit the ecological cleanliness criteria they have put forward. Giving the government power over private industry is essentially forbidden in the United States. However, when it comes to ecological processes, which essentially incorporate economic processes as well, the EPA has absolute power over these companies. Not only does this infringe on the United States Constitution, but it also exemplifies why the government cannot be relied on to regulate and enforce pollution cleanup.
My opponent brings up the statement that the burden of cleaning up the polluted world should fall on companies and consumers, not the government regulating every company. I do not agree. In an article posted by The Guardian, it said that our emission of CO2 modifies our atmosphere, the increasing water use has modified our hydrosphere, the unexpected shrinking in the Arctic and Greenland ice sheets has happened. Our increasing use of land for agriculture, cities, roads, mining, as well as all of the pollution we're creating, has started to modify our biosphere. Or another way to put it, we have started our own change of our climate. With the changing climate, ecosystems, pollution, all of it is on us. Clearly, we're not stepping up and making a change, so instead, our government needs to continue to develop and enforce policies for such pollution cleanup to keep us on our toes, so to speak. My opponent also really focuses on how human beings are responsible for the pollution cleanup. However, my research and points focus on a bigger picture: the businesses, the ships, the things that are not easily controllable. It is important for the government to enact policies and fund these cleanups to ensure that these big contributors to the pollution is held accountable.
A point source environmental prevention of waste could be either a good thing or a bad thing depending on the type of waste. The overall concept of regulation and compliance seems to be missing the point of pollution cleanup in its totality. The pollution was caused by humans as a whole, not the government. And therefore, the pollution cleanup should be stemmed from humans as a whole and not the government. Regulation and compliance seems like a parent forcing their kid to clean up the mess without really explaining the need for cleaning up the mess or why the child should even be able to clean up the mess on its own. My own opponent in this argument will use some statistically significant facts to urge the necessity for the government to step in. But simply put, it isn't the government's decision to step in or not. The final point as to why the government should not regulate and enforce pollution cleanup is that the government does not completely understand private industry. My opponent cited the fact that government economists have estimated that U.S. firms pay more than $200 billion per year to comply with federal environmental laws. Firstly, the government incorrectly states that the U.S. firms will pay this money. Anyone with a background in economics knows that while that it will be the U.S. consumers that pay this money rather than the U.S. firms. To make up for the $200 billion annual loss, the firms will simply just raise the prices of their goods are sold, ultimately putting the burden on the consumer as a whole. California, the United States leader in the green movement, has been paving the way for other environmentally friendly states to join in. However, William Fulton, a former mayor of California, director of a research institute at Rice University, and columnist for The Governing, has stated this about California's economy as of late. Here in California, we are in the middle of not just a recession, but also one of the deepest and most disturbing crises in government finance since the Great Depression. Our state spending is chronically 20% above our state revenue. He then goes on in depth as to explain why the environmental overregulations that California has issued has led to the average of state spending. The governmental regulation and enforcement of pollution cleanup is by nature a slippery slope. Once given the ability to regulate and enforce pollution cleanup, it will be hard to take said ability away from the government. It will also set a precedent for the government to control private industry through taxing and making fees, which will create a countrywide situation of overgoverning that will be hard to negate. The government tax revenue on private industry, in addition to environmental benefits produced through the cleaning, are not enough to outweigh the burden on the consumer, resulting from the governmental tax on private industry. While pollution does need to be cleaned up, it should fall on humans as a whole to clean their mess up and not the government's regulation on private industry making them do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, whether you believe that pollution cleanup policies should be enforced or not, it is important to look at both sides of the argument. My goal is to weigh the evidence presented here in an unbiased way and provide facts relating to the topic. There have been strong points made on both sides of the argument, and I hope to find a possible solution that partially satisfies each side. I'll start off by discussing the main points in Noelle's argument that stood out to me, and then move on to Joey's. Statistics are hard to refute, and Noelle gave us some solid evidence about the dangers of pollution and how it is harming humans and the environment. These facts contribute to a strong discussion of the Pollution Prevention, or P2 law, the EPA, and the benefits of having policies in place to clean up pollution. Having these kinds of policies in place reduces cost, which is one of the biggest factors at play in policymaking. In fact, the cost savings they achieve and the environmental benefits provided have been used to continue to expand the country's pollution prevention efforts. Regarding the EPA, Noel gave a lot of evidence in favor of them implementing policies and profound statistical evidence regarding the Clean Air and Water Act's beneficial improvements to the quality of life. People could not have obtained the benefits of policies like these without the federal government stepping in. Noelle's pro-government policy argument is full of sound ideas and points, and valuable evidence to back up the facts. Now we'll move on to Joey's argument. Throughout it, he uses quotes which are effective in solidifying his main points. His idea of regulations creating a view of being overgoverned is felt by a lot of people who don't agree with the policies. Many argue that decentralizing environmental policy promotes public participation and responsiveness to local environmental concerns, which could actually increase the quality of the environment. Joey gives a legitimate reason as to why the EPA is overreaching, with the fact that they have absolute power over companies regarding pollution. His argument was well laid out, and he was able to combat points made by the pro-argument of Noelle to make his point stand out. Now, in order to please both sides, I think that a viable solution would be to limit federal government involvement and pass policymaking to the state level, who can then even pass it to the local level if they so choose to do so. If pollution regulations are being made, it makes more sense to have them come from the local level, because not every place in the country has the same pollution problem. Moreover, when the power is at the local level, many people may care to enact changes, since it will more closely affect them. This solution may please the pro side because policies are still being enforced by the government, just on a smaller scale. Also, this may negate the feeling of being overgoverned felt by the con side. Plus, it makes it more of the people's responsibility. Another solution that could be effective is the idea of private governance. Private governance relies on private institutions to solve public problems, and has been particularly successful in addressing persistent environmental and sustainability dilemmas. This solution may appeal to the pro side because there would still be a policy-making body in place in order to enact specific regulations. Also, the con side may be pleased because the government is not in control and the decision-making is more in the hands of the people. I have weighed the evidence presented here to the best of my ability. There have been ample information given on both sides of the argument and plenty of facts to support their viewpoints. I hope that a solution can be agreed upon and enacted. Thank you for listening to our debate.